Commissioner Bob Rolfe is joining us tonight from the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development. It's been a really interesting past, 42 minutes chatting about all the deals happening in our state. And Commissioner, once again, thank you for joining us. We talked earlier about the big news from last week, the new Ford facility coming to produce the electric F-Series truck for Ford. It's going to be happening just east of Memphis. We already have Nissan here. We have Volkswagen here. Mitsubishi's here in some form or fashion. Why Tennessee for all these automotive companies?
Well, Carrie, thank you. This is very much an important part of our GDP. So when you look at the state, the drivers, you have agriculture, that's number one GDP driver. Number two is tourism. And then number three is advanced manufacturing. And when you peel that layer back, specifically automotive. And I think back to 40 years ago when Nissan made the decision, I think at the time, Governor Lamar Alexander was our governor. And so that was an enormous win. And that really put Tennessee on the map that many years ago. And since then, not only has Nissan thrived, but multiple expansions. And then General Motors showed up, the old Saturn model that came to Spring Hill. And as you know, the Saturn product did sunset. But today, the Saturn plant or the GM plant in Spring Hill may be General Motors' most productive plant based on the quality of the workforce and the quality of the people that make that plant successful. And then more recently, Volkswagen in the late 90s made the decision to come to Chattanooga. Well, when you take these original equipment manufacturers, you then now take their automotive ecosystem, and it's about the suppliers that support these manufacturers. And so we're proud today about 1,000 automotive companies, not only the OEMs, but the tier 1, 2, and 3 suppliers call Tennessee home. And that cluster employs about 150,000 Tennesseans. And so needless to say, very important part. And the beauty about a lot of these jobs is they don't reside in Nashville or in Memphis or in Knoxville or Chattanooga. Most of these jobs reside in our more rural communities. And that's simply A, great quality of life, and B, competing against the labor shed versus a Nashville versus a more rural community just makes a lot of sense. Having said all of that, when Governor Lee was sworn in 2.5 years ago, the first thing he came to our department and said is, look, we know we have this great automotive ecosystem, but also there's this transformation away from the internal combustion engine. We call that the ICE, to the EV, which is the electric vehicle. And I can say, Carrie, without a doubt, it is coming to a community and a neighborhood near all of us, and that is this electric vehicle. And I say that to you for a couple of reasons. Number one, this anxiety that drivers had for years about the electric vehicle is that the range was only about 100 miles, and that was real. And then the concern is, well, once my battery is run down, it takes 8 hours to repower that battery. Well, the great news is technology has come so far when it comes to the electric battery. Today, these new vehicles have a range of 300 to 400 miles, and 80% of the battery can be supercharged within 20 minutes. So all of a sudden, these companies have spent a lot of R&D to figure that out. Well, the great news is Nissan always has had an electric vehicle strategy in Smyrna. As you know, about 2 years ago, Volkswagen 2.5 years ago announced they're going to build their electric vehicle to be sold in the U.S. in Chattanooga. And then more recently, General Motors made the decision that they're going to build their brand new Cadillac Lyriq at the Spring Hill plant. So that's all to say we have all of this EV clustering in Tennessee. And then, of course, as you know from last week, Ford had made the decision to be our 4th OEM to come to Tennessee. And when you look at the Ford F-Series and you just simply identify the importance of that brand to the Ford Motor Company, that's a product that generates about $42 billion a year in sales. I mean, if you just took the F-Series sales, that would represent a top 100 Fortune 100 company, probably about 50th or 60th. So that's all to say, we truly are planting the flag since so you've got these OEMs, they've pivoted their strategy, and now it's about recruiting battery plants and other tier 1 suppliers for the electric vehicle, because the assembly of an electric vehicle looks very different than the traditional assembly of an internal combustion engine. And I can just say anecdotally about 30% fewer parts, but at the end of the day, these electric vehicles really are focused on their power, which is the battery, and then they have motors that are on each wheel, and that's really the nucleus. Now, the great news about these EVs, Carrie, you're not going to be going to the dealership every 3,000 miles or 5,000 miles to change the oil. The real maintenance is going to be new tires when you wear out the tires, and new wiper blades for when you wear out your wiper blades. And so this is really transformational. The great news is Tennessee has planted the flag thanks to Governor Lee's leadership. And when you look at what's going on, we have captured now about $12 billion of capital investment over the last 2.5 years as a part of this electric vehicle transformation, and that's led to another 10,000 jobs. So we have positioned, I think, our state to be very attractive in what truly is revolutionary, and that being the transformation away from the internal combustion engine to the electric vehicle.
No doubt it is the way of the future. And as we have talked about many of these deals over the past hour, it has become very clear to me that perhaps you lead the department that is most competitive and least like government and most like business in the state of Tennessee. And people should know, I think we always get a little nervous when we say, well, what's the investment? What's the incentive offered? And what's the investment we're getting? But you have a word for our viewers about that, because you're very well aware that their ears kind of perk up when we say incentive.
Yes, and again, it goes back to making sure these are taxpayer dollars, Tennessee taxpayer dollars no less, provided by the General Assembly funding mechanism, and we make sure that each project is incentive appropriate. And we also make sure that we protect the taxpayers. In the event that that company that comes to Tennessee doesn't deliver exactly what they promised us, because we promised them certain incentives, we have various clawback provisions that are legally enforceable, and we pursue every one of them.
Let's talk a little bit about the balancing act that must also go on when you talk about bringing these companies here. You also have to look at the infrastructure of a town or a city where they're looking at to make sure that it's sustainable. Are the schools ready? Are the neighborhoods ready? Do we have enough health care? So on and so forth.
And that's right. And of course, that's really, so our job at the state, Carrie, when a company comes to our state, is to show that company all the assets across our state. Are they looking for rail? Are they looking for port, interstate access, megawatt power, water, wastewater? And so we are the clearinghouse. And then it's up to the company to start the down selection process. And then it's up to the company to identify what community, and what you just mentioned, housing and education and medical and infrastructure, those are the local community's responsibilities. So we do rely heavily on those local partnerships. At the same time, those cities and counties and municipalities have to make the decision that they are very interested in making sure that they are able to provide those services that, again, are the responsibility of the local communities.
You have said that we are competing with cities in Texas and North Carolina and Georgia and Florida most frequently right now. And you also said that your job is to tell Tennessee's story. What is that story? What sets us apart and makes us desirable in your point of view?
Well, thank you for asking that. Right now, first of all, the Tennessee story may be the most fun story to tell in the world of sales. It goes back to having a great product. But when we talk about Tennessee, we are one of a very small handful of states that have no personal income tax. Well, every state that we compete with for manufacturing seem to be the border states around Tennessee, and they all have a personal income tax on top of the federal income tax. And then we just simply have a low structure when it comes to our taxes and how we tax businesses. And then we have a low cost of living. And then we have a good education system. And then we have what's now important, Carrie, is this what I call the livability index. With the pandemic, people have decided they don't have to live in their community, and they can be certainly, but they have all the flexibility. And so if we have this great livability index, and that's quality of life, and that's, again, the sidewalks, the local community, the niceness of Tennesseans, and at the end of the day, making sure that these companies, when they come to our communities, are successful. And if we've all done our part when it comes to their time to expand Tennessee will be at the forefront of those conversations.
We have about a minute left to chat. I wonder what's on the horizon for Tennessee. What do you have in your back pocket?
Well, the short answer is, unfortunately, Carrie, we're under non-disclosure agreements because of all these projects. But I can promise you we're going to continue to pursue the electric vehicle industry, and these suppliers are going to wrap around and support these large original equipment manufacturers for the automobiles.
Well, we are looking for good things ahead. Commissioner Rolfe, I really appreciate your transparency and you sharing so much of the story of what's happening behind the scenes at your department with us.
Well, Carrie, we're so glad to tell the story, and thank you to you and your viewers for the interest in what's going on from an economic development perspective across our great state. It's
been interesting to hear it from this side of it. Thank you very much. You have a good night.
Very good. Thanks so much.
You bet.
Cheers.
All right. When we come back, I will tell you what we have on tap for the rest of the week, so stay with us for that.